Hello, everyone. Welcome to this session. And this is the GMAT category of Unacademy. You must be wondering why I'm so happy today. Well, we have the pleasure of getting into a conversation with a charismatic gentleman. He is Mr. Gautam Lakhamraju. Now, Mr. Gautam Lakhamraju is at the helm of affairs at Great Lakes, Chennai. He is the COO. Yes, that sounds quite impressive. Mr. Lakhamraju has been quite instrumental in helping the institute evolve. The institute was co-founded in 2004, and under his able guidance, now the institute has reached great heights. So, without further ado, I'm going to take you over to this particular gentleman, and we are going to get into a conversation. I would like to welcome Mr. Gautam Lakhamraju. Hi, sir. How are you?
Thank you, Shabana, for a very warm welcome. I'm doing very well. How are you doing?
I'm great, sir. It's so good to have you over here. So, I would like to get the ball rolling by asking you how many years have you been with the institute?
So I think now it's the 13th year, completed well.
Okay.
Since the
And
founding of the Gurgaon campus in 2010, I've been associated with Great Lakes.
how did this happen to you? I mean, how did this institute happen to you? Because earlier you were with some other companies as a consultant. I know that.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I graduated from MDI in 2007. I joined a management consulting firm in the energy practice, and there I was, I was in a fortunate position that I worked with almost five of the top 10 private sector energy companies. That was a heydays of the power sector. A lot of IPOs were coming, and that sector was booming. So I had a great experience. But one thing I realized is that there was not enough manpower, qualified manpower in this sector. Right, it was primarily owned by the government in the past, and now you have private companies, but not enough talent. So we thought we'll start with a program in for the energy sector, right? And we did very well. And then we got associated with Dr. Balavi Balachandran, who's the founder of Great Lakes, right? And I think we thought it would be great to have the second campus of Great Lakes in Gurgaon, right? One is in Chennai. Having a second campus in Gurgaon meant that we had access to corporates, across the country. And Gurgaon, I think that way is like a great corporate hub with an amazing diversity of companies from multinationals to, startups to tech companies to manufacturing and so on. So that's how we started the Gurgaon campus.
Okay. And when you mentioned Mr. Bala, I just remembered something very interesting. When I was doing a little bit of reading, I came across a thing that he had said, which caught my attention. He had said, Great Lakes is it has the perfect ingredients for a veritable feast. This is how passionately he feels about the institute. And you have been quite instrumental in helping the institute evolve. So, I mean, would you tell us a little bit about it's like campuses and programs and all?
Yeah, yeah. So as you already mentioned, we have two campuses. The first started in Chennai in 2004 and second in 2010 in Gurgaon. Right. So, and we have two programs, two flagship programs, full-time programs. One is the 1-year MBA, which itself was very innovative when we launched it in 2004. This was only the second institution in the country to offer a 1-year MBA for professionals wanting to skill themselves, get into the management track, and people who didn't have 2 years to spare. So this offered them an accelerated opportunity to do that, right? So that's the first program that we introduced, and till date that continues to be the largest program. The second program we introduced was in 2014. Right? So this was actually 2012, and the first batch graduated in 2014. That's a standard 2-year program that most Indian institutions offer, right? And this 2-year program was for people with 0 to 2 years experience. The 1-year program required people to have at least 2 years of experience before they're eligible to apply to that program, right? And the reason to have that criteria is that, in an accelerated program, we wanted people to have certain level of maturity, certain level of industry experience, right? And they can leverage on that, right? And while the time span is less, the fact is that I would say that that's a higher quality of experience, right? Because you don't have a class where half the students are freshers. You have a class full of people who have been out there in the industry, have dealt with real world challenges, right? And so the quality of conversation is very different, right? And it's a lot more applied and practical, right? When there are discussions on case studies and so on, people can bring in their perspectives of working from different industries, right? So the 1 year program has the criteria of having people with experience, and the 2 year program, we said, that's a segment we were not catering to, and there are a lot of requests coming in. For we at Great Lakes, we have a lot of siblings coming and pursuing, right? The brother or sister has done it, and the next one wants to do it, and not all of them want to work and then do an MBA. So we said we'll also offer the 2 year MBA program, and that 2 year program is now doing extremely well, both in terms of the admissions and in terms of outcomes. So both the programs are now very well established in both campuses, right? And the only difference is really in the timeline. Otherwise, the faculty are common, all the facilities, infrastructure, that's all common.
A thought comes to mind. See, in today's era, Gautam sir, when there are so many business schools across the country, and there are so many schools which offer the 1 year program also. Exactly is it that sets that particular institute apart from others?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Shabana. And don't use sir, so just call me Gautam. Um, so there have been institutions of all caliber coming in, right? At one point, I think we had a lot many more actually institutions, many closed down over a period of time as well. But if you look at the segments, right? One, you have the localized schools, right? Each city would have a bunch of schools and all. I think they're essentially going to go out of business, right? They don't offer value. Students are much better off doing some online certification from a good platform, right? But the premier schools, right? Let's say the top 100, 150 schools, they'll still have very significant value, because there's rigorous selection, very high quality of training, and corporate engagement, right? And all three are important for offering a good quality program. Now, coming to how do we differentiate, right? And we are competing with some of the best schools in the country, as you said, and as a young school, right? And you have all the IIMs which are very well established, public sector funded,
Yeah,
right? So we
about
are having
20
to
of them right now.
and there are 20 of them, right? If you, and we are a school which started with one professor, starting this place with a rented building, right, with his retirement savings, right? It's a different matter that he had access to almost the who's who of management education globally, right? So we would be perhaps the only school which, I think, in the last 2-3 years would have had the deans of all the top 5 business schools in the world addressing our students, right? From Shrikant Dattar at Harvard to Sunil Chopra at I think Kellogg, and Madhav Rajan at Chicago Booth, to Deepak Jain, who was earlier Kellogg and INSEAD and now at SEEPS, right? No other school in India has that, right? That kind of access. So we had access to that intellectual capital, right? So that's unique, right? You can build as many buildings and all, but the core of learning is all about having that intellectual capacity, and second, being student-centric. From day one, we are extremely student-centric. I think many schools you go in, you get into a good school, companies come and recruit you, and all that happens, but there may not be that much involvement of faculty. But at Great Lakes, there is significant faculty involvement, and one of the things that consistently that our alumni give feedback, right, is on faculty. And I think we have some of the best faculty in the country, right, both campuses, and that has always been the core focus in terms of what our priorities are, right? So it is about learning first and foremost, and second, we have always been very much innovative, right? We were always focused on the future, right? And in academia, there tends to be a tendency to rest on your laurels, right?
Yeah.
It's a very slow moving industry. If you look at everything else, it is perhaps the slowest moving, right? Only in this space you'll find the same institutions in the rankings 10 years back and now same. If you look at any Fortune 500 rankings or any other business rankings, companies keep changing all the time. Right? What is
Right.
today's top three would be very, or top 10 would be very different from 10 years back, right? So it's a slow industry, and there is a inertia, right? So by being innovative, we could actually differentiate and grow as an institution, right? And I can talk about a few things. One is a unique program structure. It's the 1 year program catering to a new emerging segment of people wanting to reskill themselves, right? As opposed to freshers doing MBA. Second, we introduced analytics as a specialization in business school curriculum in 2013. That's almost a decade back. Right now, everybody wants to talk about data science, and that has become a very important thing. But we did it a
Allow
decade
me
back.
to allow
Yeah,
me to interrupt you over here for a moment
yeah,
because you mentioned analytics. Uh, didn't Great Lakes also introduce AI for the first time as
absolutely.
part of
That we
MBA?
that we did it in 2017.
Okay.
Right? So it's a continuous process, right? We actually review our curriculum every single year, right? Sometimes twice a
Hmm.
year. It's a continuous thing. So anything that we think is relevant for our students in the future, that helps them to differentiate once they get into the industry, right? Because everybody has otherwise the same skills, and how do you differentiate, right? So if they are better prepared to grow in the upcoming areas, right? That's how they can differentiate. They can do well. They can get a disproportionate advantage, right, over their peers, and that again reflects on the institution, right? So
Right.
we have essentially been first movers in most of the areas which relate to significant changes in the way business is done, right? And all of these things are going to change how business is done. Right now, we are talking about Chat GPT, right? So,
Yes.
so that is, let's say, going to um, change the way testing is done, right? No longer you can rely on students doing the assignment. So we have to innovate again, right? And one is to try and ban everything like mobile phones and all of that. That's one way to do it, which most people react, right? That's how academic institutions react. The
So
other is to
let
co-opt.
let me get this correct. What you are trying to say is that most of the learning at Great Lakes is driven by innovation and how
Absolutely,
you update yourself, like 2.0
absolutely,
version, 3.0 version. This is what you're saying. Okay.
absolutely.
Since you were talking about the learning part, and then you talked about the IMs and all that are there, the big brothers all around. Everybody boasts of placements because at the end of the day, what does the student want? Definitely, he goes to a great institute, but then at the end of the day, he says that, yes, I want a great placement, a hefty one. So, what would you tell us about the placements that a student can expect after
Yeah,
the 2 years or 1 year of learning?
yeah, yeah. So first thing is that I think one most good institutions, I think it's one is assured that they'll get a good or at least a decent placement, right? So and at Great Lakes, I think from 2004 we had 100% placements every single year. So that's like a given, including in 2008 financial crisis where it's just a 4-year-old institution and still managed to ensure that. So that's like baseline. But in terms of the let's say the return on investment, if you take the our 1 year program, which is a flagship, right? We have students coming with an average of about 3.3 to 3.5 years of experience, right? A little over
Mm.
3 years. That's the average, right? And their average salaries, if you take typically how much students, young professionals get at that kind of experience, it's somewhere 5 to 6 lakhs, right? Um, so our average salaries on graduation is something like 18 lakhs, right?
Mm.
So in 1 year, students, less than 1 year, in fact, students are uh, uh, going from 6 to something like 18, on an average, right? That's
Yes.
almost 3x, right? So there can't be any better investment than, education or quality education, right? Which can give you that kind of returns. And again, placements is something students do focus on because that's easy to calculate, right? But I would actually urge all students to look at doing an MBA as a much longer term investment, right? You're building a career. So placement or first job is not an end in itself. It's just the start of a much longer journey. right? And our students, from the earlier batches within 10 years have gotten into roles at CXO level, right? MDs of companies, right? They're in senior roles in companies across the world, right? Somebody who's like a director of strategy at Facebook to somebody who's a director at Visa in Singapore and so on, right? They're spread across. So that's really the end goal that students really should look at, and not just the immediate placements.
Now, as a student, how would one select between the two programs? Because by now, like you have told us a lot about the two programs. Okay, one with like a little bit of experience, somebody can go for that. So, how exactly should a student select between those two, and what are the benefits?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if I go for the 1 year program, why should I not go for the 2 years one, which and over this 1 year one, voila, is going to give me something better?
Yeah.
So, how would you explain
Yeah.
that?
The two programs are clearly demarcated in the sense one is for freshers, right? And people with limited experience, maybe 1, 2. This year we allowed up to 3 years, right? Whereas the 1 year program is for professionals. You need to have experience. You need at least 2 years of experience, right? So it's clearly demarcated, right? Now, assuming somebody who's around 2 to 3 years, somewhere in between, who can apply to both. I think the question is whether you are well prepared to take up an accelerated program, right? Are you mentally prepared, right? Whether you have had the quality of experience to give you that kind of maturity, awareness, so that you can actually get into a program where you're starting off, uh, at a certain level right from day one, right? So I think I think minimum 2 years we need to get into the 1 year program. I think post that, I think it's up to the students whether they feel that confident enough, and also it's based on our assessment, right? Our panel of faculty who assess students, whether they are prepared to benefit, because the moment people come in, right, placements start in 6 months, or sometimes less. Right, so
Right.
they need to be able to get into the grind immediately, and so have to prove themselves worth, and a salary which is 3x what they were getting just a few months back.
Yes.
So they should be up for the challenge. The 2 year
True.
obviously provides more time, especially for freshers. It gives them a lot more time to pace themselves. They have the summer internship in the middle, which gives them that necessary exposure, before getting full-fledged into a role after the 2 years.
Right. See, you just now mentioned like the faculty assesses the candidates because obviously they have to show the capability before they start getting the placements and the offers and all. Now, when you talk about the faculty assessing the candidates, so there has to be some kind of criteria that should be there with the candidates even before they join Great Lakes.
That's a very good question, and I think if you break it down into one different steps, right, and each step we assess a different set of qualities. First is, I think, that aptitude test. You have been training students there, so you know that best.
Yeah.
Right, so obviously the aptitude tests help us understand if there is a base level of capability, right, which allows students to be able to compete in a class of high performers with a fast-paced program, to be able to take in everything that's been thrown at them, right? There's so much more learning that happens in an MBA program, right? So the aptitude test is the baseline, right? It's more of a screening parameter, not necessarily a selection parameter, right? And post that, once students are called for the interview process, and we do look at the entire profile. Great Lakes is, I guess, among the fewer schools which look at the entire profile. Especially in our 1 year program, we look at their experience and so on, which are important parameters. But once we shortlist students, we have an analytical writing test, where we do want to assess the students both in terms of their written skills, but more importantly also in terms of.
Now, that's something interesting that I got to know right now. You said that analytical writing test because generally this analytical writing test is given by IIM Ahmedabad. Most
Mhm.
of the other schools they give us VAT, that is written ability test. But this
Right.
analytical writing test is something which sets Ahmedabad apart from the
Mhm.
others. And now you're saying that you also have this thing. So that's something very interesting.
So we have been, I think giving it since a decade. So it's not at least new for us. But yes, what we are looking for is not just assessing, the written abilities, right? We are actually looking whether they have a structured thought process,
Right.
right? Because that's very critical, right? In fact, majority of our students in the PGPM get placed in consulting firms, right? And there you have to be top of the game in terms of your communication, right?
Yes.
Because companies are paying you for your reports and so on, your analysis, right? So that's what we look for in the analytical writing test: how well they analyze any topic and put forth their arguments in a structured manner. So that's one step. The other is the personal interview. And again, we are trying to assess candidates on multiple dimensions. One is obviously their track record, because that's the proof of how well you did in whatever your context, right? And that's an
Consistency, you mean?
yeah,
Consistency.
consistency. And like have you been mediocre, have you been an out performer, how well you are going to do on an average in the future, right? But that's
Yeah.
just one part of it. Some people could have not done well in the past, but have figured out what their calling is, uh, 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 you know change their pace. All of that is possible, right? And that's an opportunity to actually share about your journey, right? The interview always has that. So even if you have made mistakes and you have done something to work on them, that's again a good thing to share, right? So one is
Right.
your track record. Second is your motivation, right? Why do you want to do an MBA? Is it to only get a 2x 3x salary? Is that all the reason why you want to do an MBA? Or like, do you want to actually be in that space, right? And how do we check the motivation? It's based on what steps have you taken, right? If you say that I'm passionate about something, right, you should have done a few things, right? Taken at least baby
Yes.
steps, right? You can't say that oh, once I get a seat, that's when I'll show all my passion, right?
Right.
Uh, right, for example, you can start reading something about business, right? Today we had the budget, right? So read about it, right? There's so much happening, right? Around the world. So be curious, right? And learn about it, because you say that you're willing to invest 20 lakhs 1 or 2 years to learn about management. So all this is for free. You go to Economic Times, or any of the other news portals. It's all for free, right? So at least take the baby steps, right? And that shows that you're motivated enough, right? Third, I think you should be self-aware. You should know about yourself, right? What your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, what are your successes, failures, right? And some homework at this stage would also help you, not just in getting into business school, but also do the best during the business school, because once you know where you are and you know your goals, then you can work on them, right? So that awareness is an important thing. So I would say that these three, apart from that, obviously the skills part, which is your communication skills, analytical skills, which are partly assessed in the AWT, assessed in the aptitude test, again are going to be assessed in the interview as well.
Yeah, so you spoke about IQ, EQ, self-awareness, skills, profile. I mean, I know you guys are looking for the cream of the crop, actually. So I think that's very important. You're very clear about it because you know what happens, Gautam, many times it so happens like I have been training students for quite some time now. So some of them feel that, okay, if I just crack the exam, that aptitude test, that's going to get me through to that institute. Then later they become disillusioned. They really feel, हमने तो किया था, what happened? So this is something which is catching up these days. And it's our duty, like we educators have to let them know, of course, properly that you need to get groomed or you need to kind of take up a good platform where you can actually even hone your skills. And you know, there's something that I really agree with. You talked about being like self-aware. That is something like, you know, sometimes when I ask students, tell me three strengths about yourself, students not even aware of that. So if you don't know about yourself, how do you expect to join a particular company later and then be the consultant or and analyze reports and look at the pros and cons, and you know how can you just do that? So that's something very important. Yes, good. So I got your point. Yes, you're looking for all the cherries actually. Now,
No, in fact, I would say that we are not a school which is only looking at checking the boxes in terms of highest percentiles and so on. In fact, we are not as focused on the percentiles and all. We do
mm,
want to look at people from different backgrounds. We seek diversity. We have scholarships specifically for enhancing the diversity of our class and so on, right? So
okay.
it's not about just getting the best of the students. I think the best of the students can find their way, right?
Yeah.
Irrespective of what school they get into, they'll do well, right? I think the
There
real value
has to,
addition is,
there
yeah,
has to be a basic level, you know. I mean, the
yeah,
students have to pull themselves up to that
yeah.
basic
So
level,
I think
definitely.
if you can make a good student a great professional, I think that's where a school is really doing its job.
Yes. And now, since you have told us so many things like what you expect in a student, in an aspirant, there's another thing that I'm thinking. So, let's say a student joins Great Lakes. Besides the placement thing, which is going to come in the end, what else can he expect over the next 1 year or the 2 years thing? You know, like I mean, in terms of campus, committees, or like, you know, general life at Great Lakes, can he expect things that he can cherish forever?
Yeah, yeah. So one thing you'll hear a lot of our students say is that Great Lakers never sleep. They have made
Uh-huh.
videos on the topic, right? But let's say somebody steps into the campus. One, let's say I'll talk about the Chennai campus. So that's on the East Coast Road next to Mahabalipuram. I think one, the programs are intensive, right? You have a fair amount of academic rigor. So that's one important component, obviously. And you have some of the best faculty in the country. Both are full-time faculty, as well as we are one of the few schools again. When I spoke about innovation, I didn't mention this, but one of the few schools that attracts global faculty, right? Every year we have a lot of US based faculty from some of the top schools coming and teaching our students, which is very unique in among Indian schools, right? So there is very high quality of learning that happens. That's one. Second, post, let's say, the classes and all, you have your assignments, project works, case studies, lot of teamwork, right? So that's again a very important part of the experience. Third would be all the extracurriculars, right? You mentioned committees. There are some events
Mhm.
being organized all the time, right? Or students are participating in competitions organized by corporates or other business schools, right? So that's again an important component. And then you have sports, all the sports facilities, whether it's tennis courts to basketball to volleyball, all of those are there as well. So that between all of that, I think there's enough to keep the students quite busy.
When we talked about the aptitude test, so do we actually go through CAT or GMAT or both for admission to Great Lakes?
We in fact accept GMAT, CAT, and ZAT, right? We
Okay.
accept all three of them. Again, as I said,
Mhm.
for us, the scores are the starting point. They're not the end point. You rightly mentioned earlier that students focus just on the test and not the
Hmm.
steps beyond. So we see that again as just an initial screener, right? So we accept all three exams, but however, especially in our PGPM program, we always had a preference to some extent for GMAT because it's I think taken more by people with experience, right? And
Yes.
as an audience which is also looking at schools globally, exam gives a certain signaling also, right?
So what kind of GMAT scores do you accept?
So typically, our scores would range anywhere between 600 to 750, but we'll have students who are on both sides of the spectrum as well. Our average would be
Mhm.
somewhere around like 660 to 680.
Yeah, I was just thinking that, 650, maybe that would be like the kind of average. So that's pretty doable. I mean, for a
Yeah,
student who has
yeah,
the caliber to crack GMAT, I think 650 is very cool.
absolutely. As I said, it's for us, it's a screening criteria. It's not so we
Hmm.
don't want a very high threshold. What we
Right.
care are more about the qualities they bring to the table, the track record, and so on.
Mm-hmm. And that's actually quite encouraging for the students because there are certain institutes in India. One of them is ISV. Of course, there are others also who have quite a good cutoff, like a high cutoff, like nothing below 700 would do. And so, like a lot of times, it so happens that students get intimidated. Even if they take the GMAT, they feel uncertain whether they can actually apply to those schools or not. But now, when you're saying 650, it's like even I can go around and encourage my students that, hey guys, so far you had not looked at this option, so please go on and check this option too. So that's quite a lot of interesting information about Great Lakes, Gautam. And I'm actually thankful that I got to sit with you today because being in this particular industry, I did have information about Great Lakes, but not right from the horse's mouth, as we would say. So today, when I got to know all this, I'm feeling elated. And I know that I'm eager right now to pass on all this information to my students. So thank you so much for this. And
Thank you, Shabana. It's totally my pleasure. It's a pleasure being here on Academy and interacting with you.